My guest this evening is Deborah Smith, positive psychologist, psychotherapist and psychologist. Deborah, you've been on the show before. Thank you very much for returning.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to be here again.
Brilliant. And last time we spoke about positive psychology, didn't we, and your business?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Called growing
your own happiness.
Growing your own
in
happiness.
fact, grow your own happiness.
That's brilliant. That's really good, yeah. And this evening we're talking about a different topic. And we touched on that at the end of the last show, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's more of a serious topic in many ways.
Yeah.
Not that positive psychology isn't a serious topic.
That one's a science, so that's kind of serious as well.
Absolutely.
But,
we're talking about our personal experiences, both as dyslexic people.
Yeah.
And it's the title of the show is Living with Dyslexia. And the reason we've decided to talk about this is because you and I both had very different dyslexic experiences in many ways.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we thought that would be interesting for people to hear the different sort of experiences, because everyone has their own individual response to different circumstances.
Yeah. Should we start off with early years?
Yeah.
At school, maybe. When did you first realise that perhaps you found things more difficult, some aspects of study more difficult than others?
I'm not sure when I realised it. I don't know. I don't have a recollection of when I realised it, but certainly throughout schooling there was a difference in terms of how I processed information and how everybody else did, and how I read and absorbed information compared to everybody else, and then there was the confusion of me trying to comprehend why there was this difference, and I couldn't understand it. And teachers just put it down to either I was stupid or they said, she's very intelligent, so she's obviously not applying herself. So it was an either or. So it was kind of confusing.
Yes, very difficult. I think I knew by the age of 7 that my reading was nothing like my peer group. And I used to pretend I was reading by spending long enough on each page and then turning over during silent reading. Did you do anything like that?
Well, no, I decided to take a different route and just not do any work at all. So that was my way of dealing with it. I decided instead of pretending, I'd just say, no, I refused and wouldn't do anything, and was difficult, rebellious, and a pain. A pain.
And that's where we both reacted differently, isn't
Yes,
it? Isn't it? To look back, isn't it interesting how two people have reacted so differently to an experience of dyslexia?
Exactly.
In the education system.
Exactly. I feel sorry for myself, my teachers, and my parents all at the same time.
Well, I feel sorry for myself, or I did at the time as well, because I was trying to conform. I was trying to fit in. Yet I wasn't being my authentic self, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I was determined that I didn't see any reason to conform, and I was adamantly not going to conform, and I very much didn't. And so I was asked to move on from several different schools.
Were you?
Yes, I was. Yeah, schools kind of found it difficult to deal with this non-conformist rebel person.
And did that go on throughout your school
years?
Yeah,
it certainly did. And to ultimately, I left school at age 15 with no qualifications whatsoever.
Yes.
So it didn't go so well for me.
Well, I left school at 17 with only 2 qualifications, so it didn't go so well for me either.
So who's to say which route was the better?
Who's to say? Well, this is what we're trying to find out, isn't it? The reactions. And I know we've spoken before in quite a lot of depth about trying to capture something of this dyslexic identity business and who we are and how it's shaped us and what the outcome is.
Yeah.
And it's good to have a positive outcome. But I think with dyslexia, when your natural strengths aren't reading aloud, your natural strength isn't remembering things usually. And I think it's important to identify the natural strengths of children and adults experiencing dyslexia. And I know that mine probably weren't really identified at school. Art, creativity, yes, but other things.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think whether you're dyslexic or non-dyslexic, being aware of what your strengths are and playing to your strengths is key to one's self-esteem and awareness of self and inner confidence.
Yes, I agree with you.
Which, of course, feeds into everything in life.
How do you think the teacher should have reacted to you? Or could have reacted to you?
Well, I think if they listened to me, that would have been a good start, because they certainly didn't listen to me. So therefore, my frustration and anger built. And at one school I went to a boarding school for a couple of years. They tried that as a see if boarding school will tame her. That was like putting a wild animal in a cage. It really didn't work very well. And at one point I went to the headmistress to advise her how to deal with me. I thought, I'll try that method. And they really didn't like that. And so I got put on punishment on a regular basis after that, i.e. every night.
Yes.
And so just being listened to, if they'd actually listened to what I had to say, then of course I knew what I was struggling with, but everybody was so busy telling me what I should or shouldn't do that that I just felt that I constantly had to fight.
So you were struggling with schoolwork, you were finding it difficult to read, you were finding it impossible to complete written projects and all those kinds of things. Would that be right?
I can't really remember what I was struggling with in terms of the academic work, because I think I was so busy fighting everybody and refusing to do anything. And just, so I don't remember what I was actually struggling with.
You didn't enjoy school at all?
No, I did not, no.
You were very passionate about not going to school and very forthright about how you felt.
Yeah, definitely. Forthright about not being controlled.
Yeah. And for me, I kind of conformed. So, and I know you can't remember many of your educational experiences apart from this fight and wanting to be yourself and insisting that you were.
Yeah, that's right.
And I suppose for me, the thing that's coming to my memory at the moment is having to read out loud in the class and the humiliation around the classroom and the anticipation of it having to be my turn to read. And my heart rate would increase, my palms would sweat. I was petrified.
Horrible.
And then I'd rehearse the paragraph that I thought I'd have to read.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear any of what the piece of work was about. I had no idea what it was about. Complete waste of time. So I'd go ahead and rehearse this paragraph, and then perhaps it might not even be the paragraph I'd have to read.
Right.
And then I'd trip up over words, and I'd just feel absolutely awful. And I wasn't empowered enough to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that's
Why
awful.
wasn't I? I don't know. But so my message to any children still at school now listening to this would be, if you don't want to read, say so. Yeah. And my message to any educators or parents would be to say, you know, the very well-known fact is, please don't ask a dyslexic person to read unless you're sure that they feel comfortable to do so in front of the other people. So that was, part of my experience. And those educational experiences I had, I think, are the reason why I ended up working as a dyslexia specialist for many years, for 20 years at least, and I'm still practicing in that, supporting people in that way too. So that's part of my reason. And yet you don't recall an experience like that.
No, because I, in all probability, if they had come round to me, which no doubt they must have done, I probably would have said, in maybe not the most polite words, that no, I don't want to be reading, thank you very much. And I just wouldn't have done it.
So you were kind of looking after yourself better, or perhaps there's no comparison. I don't think we can compare the two.
I'd really like to say it was because I was looking after myself, but it really wasn't. It was more coming from a feeling of not wanting to be exposed because I felt stupid. Yes. And I did not want to be exposed to be stupid. And I didn't understand why I could comprehend some things and seemingly excel in some things and other things I was struggling with. And so I really didn't want to be exposed because I had this internal battle.
So you knew that to read aloud would have exposed you, I'm guessing.
I must have.
And like you, I felt stupid. I felt inadequate.
Yep.
I felt I wasn't good enough.
Yes, exactly.
And I wasn't meeting my own expectation or the expectation of the school or probably of my upbringing. Or society. So so there are the very similarities, aren't there, there?
Oh, definitely.
But we just reacted so differently.
Exactly. We both reacted in an opposite way. And you know, I desperately needed somebody to help me understand what was going on within myself. And that didn't happen until my adulthood.
No. And if you were, and perhaps this is a big ask, I don't know, but if you were to think back to your childhood now, and you were that little girl now, you know, what would you say to you as your little self, as your younger self, maybe a 13-year-old self or?
Well, it would have been great to explain what was going on and why I was struggling with certain things and why my processing is different and why words go all over the page and why numbers jump around and all that sort of thing. It would have been great if somebody could have explained that to me.
And of course, when words are going all over the page, it might be because of scotopic sensitivity or Erlin syndrome. Did you have problems tracking print and keeping where you were, keeping place where you were?
Yeah.
And does that still happen now or as an adult, or has that stopped?
No, that still happens now, but I've learnt loads of different coping strategies to deal with it.
Yeah.
So now I do read and I've had to read, I don't know how many books in my adulthood, but in my childhood, I remember the 2 books I read as a child.
Yes, and what were they?
2 books.
What were they? I read about 1 book every 5 years.
Yeah, I remember reading, what was it? Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland, yeah.
Lovely book.
Yes.
And Jane Eyre.
That's really good. Yeah. And I remember listening to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, read by actually one of the teachers who I didn't like her, actually. I felt that she was very bossy and I felt very inadequate in her class. I was quite young at the time. But she did read the class Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I thought that was great. I just loved the story.
Yeah, wonderful.
And maybe The Hobbit. Maybe The Hobbit too. I think there were parts of The Hobbit that were read.
That's pretty good.
I enjoyed being read too. I loved it when we were being read stories. Yeah. And now as an adult, once every 5 years, I read a book. Do you read for pleasure now?
I do. Yeah, I read a lot. One, because I've done so much studying through my life, through my adulthood, should I say. I've studied a huge amount.
Yes.
And because I'm passionate about my subject, I read a lot of books,
And they're mainly about psychology-related books.
Exactly. Psychology, Buddhism, mindfulness, and spiritual matters. Yes, I read a lot.
And really, we're talking about a reaction to dyslexia and a reaction to the education system and not feeling that you weren't heard and you couldn't be who you were.
Exactly. They were trying to constrain who I was, and I was having to fight back against that. But I know that you do some amazing work, and I only wish that I was able to have somebody like you who was able to help me understand what was going on and give me different techniques. But can you explain the different things that you do? If somebody comes to you with dyslexia, whether they're a child or an adult, because I know you deal with both adults and children, what sort of things do you do? What can you...
Well, I support across the age range, and very often, like the story you've told, people have had uncomfortable educational experiences, and they're perceiving dyslexia in whatever way they are. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe some children, you sounded quite rebellious.
Yes, I was.
Maybe you wouldn't have accepted help, but I think what you were saying earlier is that you would have accepted help at that time. had somebody listened.
If it was the right sort of help, then
And very much my work for the last 20 years or so has been about listening to other people's experiences and supporting them with what we might call the secondary effects of dyslexia, as well as in a practical way. So
that's
finding out
interesting.
how
when
they
you're
experienced
saying
it.
secondary effects, can you explain what you mean by that?
Relating to themselves as stupid, which, I've done myself in the past too, so I understand from that experience as well. Relating to themselves as inadequate, not believing in themselves. It's about helping people to believe in themselves and to recognise their strengths. It's all about helping them to recognise their own unique strengths and working in that way.
That's brilliant. And so what sort of things do you do with people that help them in that way?
It all depends what they need. And usually often I use a solution-focused approach. So we identify the problem. I understand dyslexia, so usually I understand where they're coming from. And if I don't, I try to find out. I usually do. And we write down the problem so they take ownership of it. I find it impossible to copy from the whiteboard, for example. And then we look for all the possible solutions. And then we find a solution.
That's really great.
And we speak to school as well. So that way, and the parents, so that way, hopefully it can make a little bit of difference for them.
No, it won't make a little bit of difference. It'll make a huge amount of difference.
Yeah. Well, often it does, actually.
Yeah, I have no doubt. There's no way that you minimize it by saying it makes a little bit of difference, and it won't. It'll make a huge amount of difference.
I think you're right. It's because I'm also dyslexic that it's such a... It's that area, isn't it? It's, I don't know. I've overcome dyslexia, I think, as far as, in a practical way.
Yeah.
But I'm still a dyslexic person. It's still my identity. And I think when I speak to other dyslexic people like yourself, we've got that kind of understanding of what this thing, if it is a thing, it's not a thing, it's a learning difference, but what it means to us. And I believe it's because the system we're in isn't conducive to people who are creative thinkers. It's more conducive to sort of left-brained lists, lines, logic, rather than being more open. How do you feel about that?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's often the problem, isn't it? Because the system isn't designed for people who think differently. No. And that should be a wonderful thing. It should be welcomed. They should be really excited by somebody who thinks differently.
Yes.
Because it's the different thinkers who come up with the amazing ideas.
Yes, exactly.
Einstein wasn't an in-the-box thinker.
No, he wasn't.
So, and I believe he was a dyslexic.
You've talked about your education and how challenging you found school, and in fact said you were quite challenging at school for the teachers because they didn't know how to support you at the time.
Definitely.
And to have somebody to listen to would have helped, somebody who you could speak to and who understood your experience would have helped.
Yeah, because they didn't understand dyslexia at that time, so it was not that they were being difficult necessarily, it's that they didn't understand and they didn't recognise it as dyslexia. And so, therefore, nor did I, nor did my parents, and nobody really understood what was going on.
And at that time, your way of coping was to avoid, to act out, and that's how you coped.
Yes.
What happened? You left school really early, didn't you?
So I left school at 15 with no qualifications whatsoever, and then I found that psychology was my thing, and I started studying Buddhism. And there's a lot of philosophy and Buddhism philosophy and psychology within Buddhism, and I absolutely loved it. And I studied and just loved studying.
Yes. Never
loved studying in my life before, but I found my subject, and it was something I was passionate about.
And your background, was that were your parents religious or Buddhist or anything else?
Not at all. Not at all.
Like that?
But I had practiced meditation from an early age, and so I guess that had opened my mind, but I still didn't know anything about Buddhism. I happened to encounter it, and once I'd encountered it, I couldn't get enough of it, and I just went to class on class and studied like crazy. And it was having studied Buddhist psychology that I then went on to study Western psychology.
Yes.
And I had, by that time, I had a child, and so I was a single mum.
Yeah.
And so I did it through the Open University. So I studied at night, at home, on my own, and did a degree in that manner for 6 years through the Open University.
That's excellent. And did you know you were dyslexic at that time, officially? Was it official?
Still not official. I just struggled through my university, but I was so determined and I was so passionate about the subject that I just worked really hard and actually did quite well. But no, it was still not diagnosed at that stage of life.
When did it get diagnosed? What happened after that?
So then I practiced as a psychologist and as a psychotherapist, and I continued to study and loved it. And then only recently, and we're literally talking about only a few years ago, and bearing in mind I'm now in my mid-40s, I did my master's degree, and I thought at this stage might be helpful if I went and got a diagnosis and let's see what they say.
I remember you spoke to me about it at the time.
Yeah, I phoned you to ask you, what do you think? Shall I get go and get diagnosed, go and get assessed, and what do you think? And of course there was a fear in me that they might say, well, after all, we've realised that it is that you're really stupid and you're not dyslexic at all.
That's always the concern, that they're going to say no.
Yeah, well, it was a little bit scary.
So what happened when they said, when you were told? Did you hear it in the report, or did they tell you at the time?
Yeah, they said you're dyslexic and dyspraxic, and that was kind of a relief in a funny sort of way. And then they allowed me to have I don't know what they're called, a dyslexic coach or whatever they're called. What are they called?
You had the disabled students allowance, didn't you?
Yeah,
and that gave you a one-to-one tutor to help you with some support.
Exactly.
During your degree.
And the lady I had called Melanie Long, who works up in Lampeter University, she was really, really great. And she gave me all sorts of coping strategies to deal with my dyslexia. And it was like, wow, hallelujah.
And what would you say to anybody now who thinks they may be dyslexic in your situation?
Go and get assessed as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Really, you can't get assessed soon enough, because it's really going to help the way you understand yourself, the way you understand how you absorb information, and how the best way for you to learn. I mean, what about you? What's happened in your adult life? Because I think, for me, what I think is the most important message I can convey is, even though I was left school as a loser in a lot of people's eyes, I have turned out to have a master's degree in positive psychology, and
Just goes to show, doesn't it?
relatively successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very successful, I'd say. Very successful.
But what about you, Ruth?
Well, for me, I left school at 17. I got married very young. I had just the 2 qualifications. I'd taken my English GCSE 3 times and still not got a C at that stage.
Right.
I had my children very young. And then I did an access course when I was 27, which was an A-level equivalent. And I passed my English GCSE, and my confidence grew, and I studied psychology and sociology at university, and then I worked with adults with mental health issues and, learning problems as well. And then I specialised in working as a dyslexia specialist. Now, of course, and I also work with meditation, and I also work with Reiki, and I'm a hypnotherapist too. So these things have all come about because of my personal development and helping other people with their personal development. My passion for people to feel okay about who they are.
It's amazing that we're both working with people, and we both have a desire to help people.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder if that's coming from both of us wishing that somebody had helped us and had that desire when we were younger. It might have made a difference.
It may well have made quite a difference, yes. And I'm going to close up a bit now with the show, and I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me.
Real
this
pleasure.
evening.
Thank you so much.
It's just been lovely, and I hope you'll come back and talk about Buddhism another time.
Absolutely.